When I finally understood how to use brake bias the right way, it seriously felt like a magic switch. There are already a couple of good videos about brake bias on YouTube, but if you've ever seen any of my videos, you know that I'm different, which basically means I like to explain things from my own experience. Now, I know some of you guys already know what brake bias is. Congratulations, you're very smart. For everyone else, we need to get the basics out of the way first, and after that I will explain the two ways I found brake bias the most powerful. The first one is all about stability and comfort. The second one is about rotation and is even faster than the first one. Now hold on, before you just skip to the faster method, you lazy lizard. They require different driving styles and both of them can actually help you. Okay. Brake bias defines how the braking force is distributed between the front and the rear of the car. In other words, how much braking goes to the front compared to the rear tires. And the reason this matters is weight transfer. Most cars are already a bit heavier in the front, and when we brake, even more weight shifts forward onto the front tires. So they get heavier, get pressed to the ground, and that's why they have more grip and can handle more braking force than the rear tires. In normal cars for everyday use, the brake bias is set to a default for stability and safety. But the cool thing is, in most race cars, brake bias is actually adjustable. Why? Because that turns brake bias into a very powerful tool. Now, there are two ways we can adjust brake bias. We can add brake bias to the front, making the front brake stronger, which makes the car more understeery, or to the rear, making the rear brake stronger, which makes the car more oversteery. Generally, an understeery setup is considered a safe setup, because when we go over the limit in an understeery setup, the car suddenly stops turning, but at least you are still going straight in a predictable way, compared to an oversteery setup, which is considered faster, but once you go over the limit there,
shit's going crazy.
So that's the theory behind it. The thing is, everybody drives a little bit different. Driving line, brake points, braking curve, steering angle. All those things make the same brake bias setting feel a little bit different for everybody. On top of that, the right brake bias not only changes from car to car, it changes from race to race because of different weather conditions. And even during a race, the weather can change, the weight of the car changes as you burn fuel, and of course the tire conditions change the longer the race is going. And that's how I found the first method. For this method I chose the Fiat F4 car, because it has no ABS and you can see the tires, which makes it much easier to understand what's actually happening. The goal of method 1 is stability. We want as much control as possible, and we achieve that by finding the sweet spot between understeer and oversteer while getting the maximum grip under braking. The default brake bias for this car on this track is 57.5%. Now, turn 1 here in Oschersleben is a bit special because we arrive at high speed, start steering before we even hit the brakes, and there's also a change of direction. So I prefer a slightly more understeery setup here to avoid any snap oversteer. That's why I start with a higher brake bias, about 3 clicks to the front to 58.2%. As you can see, the car is very stable, but the front right tire starts locking up. The car doesn't want to turn and I can't even stay on track. Now, you might think the tires are already at their limit, but that's not entirely true. It's mainly the front tires that are overloaded. The rear tires still have grip left. So what we do is take some load off the front and give it to the rear. Now, just to check if I'm missing something, I go the other way and dial it back quite a bit to 56.5%. You can already see the rear getting loose even before the right turn. All 4 tires have grip, but now the rear is much closer to the limit. The extra rotation helps to stay on track and I can actually handle it while braking, but the moment I apply throttle a bit too aggressively, the car starts to spin. So for this corner, that's a bit too much. So we go back to a more front biased setup and work our way towards the sweet spot. From 58.2%, we go back 1 click to 58%. And that's already much better. The car is stable, but the front right tire is still right on the edge of locking up. And this is exactly what we're looking for. It's not fully locking up, but you can still see it turning slower than the left tire, which means the front brakes are still just a tiny bit too strong. So we go 1 more click back to 57.7%, and that feels really good. Stable under braking, no risk of spinning, no lockup, lockups and maximum grip. So I take 57.7% as my base and drive the rest of the track. And if there's another corner where the balance doesn't feel right or the tires start locking up, I repeat the exact same process. Sometimes I even switch between 2 or 3 brake bias settings per lap just to get the best balance for each corner. And just to be clear, yes, you can prevent all the lockups and over and understeer by adjusting your driving, by braking earlier, taking a different line and so on. But that basically means you adapting to the car. But this method is about adapting the car to you. And that's why this method is so powerful for beginners to intermediate drivers, because it reduces the margin for error, makes the car easier to control and gives you confidence, which directly improves your consistency. And now, before we jump into the faster method, I actually have one bonus method I really need to show you.
Try to relax your anus.
After I started messing with brake bias a bit, I also started paying attention how fast drivers on YouTube were using it. And I really couldn't find anyone who wasn't running their brake bias at least a few clicks to the rear. And when I saw Aiden Paul running his brake bias at something extreme like -5, I was like, oh my god! Wow! That's the trick to being fast. So I loaded into a test session, put my brake bias to something like -5, and I tried it a few times and then I was like, nope, that's not it. But now I know that's actually exactly what it is. I just wasn't good enough to handle it yet, or consistent enough to even tell if brake bias was the thing making me faster. That loose rear gives you rotation under braking, and that's exactly what trail braking is. And trail braking requires a lot of finesse on the inputs and a much smoother driving style than I was using before. So I went from braking late and hard to the famous slow in, fast out, which just means instead of gaining time with aggressive late braking, we sacrifice the entry phase to rotate the car into the corner, carry more speed through the apex and get a much better exit. So as I became a better driver and got more comfortable with trail braking, I gave it another shot. Mid-practice, I moved the brake bias about 1% to the rear, and that's when it finally clicked. Steering suddenly felt easier in a way. Instead of fighting the steering wheel, I could just guide the car through the corner. It felt so smooth and easy that I would have never thought that I was faster than before. But the delta showed me that I was actually over 2/10 quicker just in the first corner. And by the end of the lap, I was almost a full second quicker than before. And since then, I actually started using it as a little trick on myself. I begin practice with the default brake bias, push until I hit my limit, and then I move it a few clicks to the rear. And every single time I'm surprised how much easier and faster the car suddenly feels. But like I said earlier, this only works if you have a decent feeling for the car and can drive somewhat consistently. So when you try it out yourself in a test session, don't feel bad if you can't handle a rear. Don't feel bad if you can't handle a brake. Fucking. Don't feel bad if you can't handle a rear brake bias setting. Being fast requires more than just the right brake bias. And having a fast brake bias setting means nothing if you can't control it. So how the car feels to you is more important than any specific brake bias number. With more practice and time, you will naturally get more comfortable with moving it to the rear. Because in reality, you don't have to choose between these two methods. They actually work together. The first one gives you control and consistency. And the second one builds on top of that to unlock more speed. So I would use the first one as a base and then slowly build from there. Just start experimenting with it. It's really not that complicated. Use it as a tool to make you faster or safer, whatever you need. In my last video, I explain how I consistently finish races on the podium. If you haven't seen it yet, don't watch it, it's absolutely disgusting. Also, I'm really happy you guys enjoy my videos so much. My like rate is exceptionally good with over 98%, so seems like the only dislikes I get is from cross-eyed people who miss the like button, or from people who know me personally. I'm not trying to scam you guys into subscribing, but we're doing another giveaway at 5k subscribers, which is only somewhat like 300 subscribers. 300. And by the way, the winner of the More Redness Gloves giveaway still didn't contact me. If you see this, please DM me on Instagram or I will have to choose a new winner. And now, as a thank you for staying till the end, I want to show you something really cool. Wait a second. Do you see who's driving this car?